Hey there everybody. Today in this video we're going to be talking about completing the square. Just as a little preface here, I'm under the assumption that we already have done this and that you just need a little refresher. So we're going to do one with no leading coefficient or a coefficient of 1, and then something with a coefficient that's larger than 1 and how we deal with that. So the big thing with completing the square is it helps us get from a general form quadratic function, meaning y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, and convert that into vertex form, okay, where x minus h squared plus k gets us into that value, okay, and it helps us identify the vertex, which also means if we know the vertex, we know the min and the max of that parabolic function, which will help us when we start doing application stuff if we would get that far. Okay, so let's get into solving some of these. So I want to look at this quadratic function. I want to solve this into vertex form by completing the square. Then I want to find the vertex. If you think you have an idea or you remember how and you want to try it before I show this, go ahead and pause the video now, see if you can figure that out, and tell me what the vertex is and what the vertex form would look like. Otherwise, you can keep listening in. Okay, so again, our objective is to get into a form that looks like y equals x minus h squared plus k, something in that sense. That means that I need to get into this, which is a double factored form, or something that has the same factor. So it would look something like this, where I combine it into one thing, x minus, or plus, I guess, square for that. So that's where completing the square comes in. Okay, so my job is I got to figure out what that c value is. Now I'm going to regroup these or associate this and that. And you can already see how our original quadratic is starting to already look like that factored form. I already have what would be considered a k value, or something that's in the place of that k value, and then I'm starting this piece in here. Okay, so now I have to say, well, what do I have to do next? Well, now I need to, if I consider this, the quadratic in there, this is where completing the square comes in, where I need to figure out, oops, that's a minus. I need to figure out what goes in for that c, okay? For right now, we're just going to leave that. I know some of you might be saying, I'm missing a part. I'll get there, I promise. Okay, so if we want to see how, I need to, shorthand, I need to divide my b value by 2, and then I square it. So I know that would be 81. If some of you can think, if some of you get it and think like that, that's great. If you don't know how I got that, let's think about this in kind of our little box method here when you solve these. So I want to get to something that is, I want to get to negative 18, where I know that when I have this factor, this will be x squared. And now I want to know what this x and this to the x, those are my b values here. This plus this is going to give me all of that. And it's going to be split up nice and equal. So hopefully you can look at, if I have negative 18, that means this has to be minus 9 minus 9, right? Negative 9x and negative 9x gives me negative 18. So that means that that is this chunk right here. Okay, but I'm not done, because in order to have that whole thing, I need a c value. Well, you see how I get my 81, negative 9 times negative 9, there's 81. Okay, that's what completing the square does almost, because I need to keep this balanced. Right now, this is an imbalanced equation because of this fact. I added an 81 to this whole equation, and from the start, and I haven't got it balanced. Now I can do that two ways. I can either have I can either add 81 on this side, so I'd have y plus 81, but I'm going to have to move it over anyways. So what I can think of it as is that I'm going to cancel it out, or make it go to 0. Minus 18x plus 81. Well, how do I make that go to 0? Well, if I have everything here, the way that I can cancel it out or make it go to 0 is minus 81. These are my completing the square pieces. And if you look, I still have the same 3 elements as when I started. 1, 2, 3. And these parts are simply a fancy form of 0, right? Plus 81 minus 81 and it's all there. So now I can finish completing the square because now I have that x minus 9 squared, right? X minus 9 times x minus 9. That'll give me all of this, so I can simplify that. And then the last little piece is I need to put this together, so it'd be plus 19. And there is my vertex form. Okay, now hopefully from that you can automatically see that I have my h and my k already given, so I know the vertex from that vertex form, which would be 9, 19. Okay, so the big piece with this completing the square is, let me change colors because it's all yellow right now. This chunk, that's the number or the value I need to figure out in order to get to this next step, to go from here down to here and give me this piece and what my eventual k value will be. Okay, now that's with no leading coefficient bigger than 1, where I don't have anything in front of the x squared. And that's pretty basic as far as that goes. Half your b value or square it, if you want to think that way, or if this is a better visual for you, you can use that as well. It doesn't matter to me how you do that. Okay, so let's try another one, but let's do it with a leading coefficient bigger than 1 for our other example. Now again, if you think you got it, go ahead, pause the video, see if you can finish that up. Otherwise, I'll be going here in just a second. So pause the video if you want, go through and then see if you got it. Otherwise, if you want to see, let us begin. Okay, again, I'm going to associate my x squared value, my ax squared, and my bx, but when I have a leading coefficient here, I can also see if I can pull something out, okay, which I can in this case. I can pull out a 3 from both of these. So that would mean it'd be y equals 3. Now I can do my associating x squared plus 8x plus 5. Okay, now I can go ahead and treat this just like I did with my last example in here. Okay, now again, if you can't see that you just half the b value and square it, we can think of this again as that little box example here, where I know I have x, where that gives me my x squared, that's this piece. Now I want to figure out what gives me my 8x. Well, that would have to mean that each piece here is 4x. Remember, these two together added, the sum of those gives me this. Okay, well, that would mean it would have to be 4 there, right? X times 4, which means, dun, 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 completing the square gives me 16, which needs to come in here. Now 3 times, and then we'll go x squared plus 8x. Completing the square gives me that plus 16. Okay. And then plus 5. Let me move this down just a little bit. Okay. Now, I do need to, oops, why is this giving me nothing? Anyways, I do need to have my other completing the square. Now, it is not just 16, and there's a reason for that, because of my coefficient. Because the value that what I added to this is not just 16. What I added this is 3 times 16, okay? So I need to do the same thing over here, which means this is really not just 16, but it's really 3 times 16 because of my coefficient that I have out front, okay? So that really means that instead of 16, this is 3248. Okay, so y equals, this still stays, so 3. And I'm going to combine all this. That's what gives me my x plus 4 squared, right? And then in this case, because this is 48 minus 5, this is negative or minus 43 for my actual k value for my vertex form, okay? So the biggest mistake most people make is when they complete the square, especially if there's a leading coefficient or something that you pulled out, or your scale factor, is another way to think of it, is that you do not apply that to your square value that you add to this, okay? So you need to make sure that that's happening when you have a leading coefficient bigger than 1, okay? Now I can name my vertex, right? -4, -43. Okay, and that's pretty much the basics. Kind of a little refresher or review. I'm kind of showing you a couple different ways This little box method is helpful if you want to be able to get a different visual, or again, if you get the understanding of, I simply just take half of this and square it. 8 divided by 2 is 4, squared is 16, and I can do that. Same thing with the one before that. Negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9, squared is 81. Okay, it doesn't matter what that is, decimals, fractions, negatives, positives, all that good stuff. Same process. Okay, that'll be it, guys. Get that practice going. Work on that vertex form and converting and find those vertex values. Okay, let us know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a great